So we had a conversation earlier about what it is we want to accomplish in this session. And the first thing we want to talk about, I think, given where we are today, is the issue of crisis and how we manage, or how we go about managing cities that are going through very, very difficult times. Now, Betsy, as I said, you basically have lived difficult times through your entire tenure as city manager of Las Vegas. How did you think about going about it? Like, what were the few high-level approaches or strategies that you had in mind, and then how did they work out?
I can't probably do the story justice, but I'll try just to kind of frame it up. I'm sure all of you have maybe read some of the things that the city of Las Vegas has weathered in this recession. For 20 to 30 years, we were the darling child on growth. We eclipsed everybody in our rate of growth. Building 15 schools a year. People just can't even wrap their head around how quickly we were growing. Incredible population growth, income growth, almost all of it directly related to expansion of gaming in southern Nevada, but other sectors as well. And when things came to a screeching halt in 2007, we barely recognized it. I don't know, maybe some people might describe that kind of as a black swan event, right? Because even the people that really are supposed to be the ones that can see things into the future missed it for us. But we probably should have known. Looking back at the data now, we should have known earlier than we did, but I don't know that we would have ever responded as quickly as we needed to. So that was about the time that the city manager that preceded me decided it was time to hang up his running shoes and retire. And one of the fun things about your career progression is you never know when that opportunity is going to arise that you might be able to step into a leadership position, and that just happened to be the time for me. And we very quickly knew that we had to figure out where we thought the bottom was going to be, because it felt like there wasn't one at the time. We were seeing double-digit revenue drops, which is really astounding. And even today, earlier this week, we had our budget hearing, and I had to explain to council that on an inflation-adjusted basis, we were still down to 2004, 2005 levels in our revenues. That's 20% less than when I started as city manager. But we didn't not grow during that period of time. That was one of our greatest growth periods. So we had new community centers, new roads, new fire stations, new everything to support the community that had been growing. And our population has stayed pretty flat. So it's not like we've had a mass exodus that dropped our service requests or our service needs. So it's been kind of crazy. And actually, we have right now less employees serving our community than we had in 2001. So we've cut our expenses by about 18%. And this is the first budget that I've had as city manager that I've actually been able to approve staff salary adjustments upward in 4.5 years. So I feel your pain here in California. I know what you guys have had to weather, and it's been pretty astounding. I think some of the things that Raphael laid out as efforts that we undertook really do illustrate there's not, one arrow that's going to work when you're seeing that kind of drop. You've got to use your whole arsenal, and you've got to be extremely inclusive. One of the things that I found most difficult is that our community was fairly disengaged. We're sort of transient. We were growing very quickly. People moved from house to house, which was part of our problem in the housing bubble. There was not a whole lot of community identity or community pride or community commitment or engagement. And here I was as a new city manager trying to get the community engaged in problem solving. Let me just say this. that is not the best time to be asking your community for help when they are looking to you for help. It can work, but it takes a lot of effort. And so getting your employees involved, getting your council involved, getting your community involved in the decision-making process, which for a lot of managers is terrifying because it feels very out of control. But when things are spiraling out of control, you're out of control anyway. So you might as well make the best of it and get everybody in the pot. And that's what we did. And I think it made a big difference because people began to understand the magnitude of the problem. They were willing to work together to try and resolve that problem. That was not without pitfalls. It took massive layoffs for us to get many of our bargaining units to the table in earnest to work out a solution. I was told that early in my career. One of my mentors, who was a county manager in Florida, I was talking to him and I said, I don't see any way out of this without compensation concessions from the employees. There's just no way to do it unless we eliminate a lot of services and lay people off. And he said, they're never going to come to the table and give you back anything you've already given them, Betsy. Just know that. Eventually, you're going to have to lay people off so that you can get what you need at the bargaining table. And unfortunately, that's exactly what played out, despite our best efforts. And to this day, and I'm sure many of you have felt the same way, I see some of those eyes at night, in the middle of the night, in my dreams, of those really good employees that we couldn't afford to keep. Not because they didn't have work to do, but we just couldn't afford to keep them. And they may have been the best employee, but we weren't able to keep them because of all the other bargaining commitments we had made in prior years. So it was tough. We pulled out everything we possibly could. We privatized things. We worked with our Chamber of Commerce and local businesses to try and figure out things they could do that we could no longer afford to do the way we had been doing it. We tried not to compromise quality. But nonetheless, we still had to curtail hours and service levels and things of that nature. And we're just barely starting to build those things back now.
So can I ask you a question? So that sounds like a miserable set of years. Are you glad to be there?
I love it.
So
I love my job. I mean, I feel, like I said, you never know when these opportunities arise, but sometimes I think opportunities happen that fit your skill set. And I think I was in the right place at the right time, and I was the right fit for that council at that time, given the situation that's been going on. And it was hard. It actually has been extremely difficult. But I kept thinking, boy, if you can weather this storm and make your way through this kind of massive adjustment in an organization of our size, serving a city of 600,000 people, you can do anything. And I kind of believed that anyway. I'm self-confident. But I kind of really believed that if I could get through this, if I could rebuild our community with the help of our council people and our employees and our community, boy, what a great thing to have in the back of your mind that builds your own pride and your pride in your community and your commitment to that community. So for me, it was what I felt like public service is all about, what my commitment to this profession is all about. It was a really unique opportunity to really bring everything I had to try and make this better, to make us emerge stronger and leaner and smarter, hopefully. And that's what we've been shooting for.
Well, we'll talk more about the leaner and smarter in a second, but I wanted to go to Tom because you saw a similar trajectory in Park City to what's happened in Las Vegas. How did you approach the change?
Yeah, our story is a little different, although very similar in many ways, but a little different. Park City is a resort town, so we depend upon the ski industry and the weather for our economy. And so I think we had a built-in sort of conservative nature to begin with, where, if it doesn't snow, we've got problems, And so I think we had a mindset for a long time of trying to be more conservative. And so, when the crisis came, we were able to adjust. We didn't have to do layoffs. We had to cut services. And we were also coming out of the Olympics. And so we were booming coming out of the Olympics. And there was no way that we could pull off the Olympics, an event of that magnitude, with our size. And so what we did during the Olympics is we got out of our normal way of doing business and did what was ever needed to be done. And so on one day, I might have been running the city, and on another day I might have been, manning a barricade. And the joke I make, is those were the good days, right? Where, sorry, you don't have that pass. You'll have to talk to my supervisor. Those were, those were the good days. And so that got us into this mindset of let's do whatever needs to be done. And I was appointed right after the Olympics, and we said, well, why can't we do that all the time? And we didn't really know any better, so we just did it. And we changed our organization and completely flattened it. And I think it's a lot easier to turn the ship, when you don't have to. And we did it early, and so that doesn't mean we weren't hit. That doesn't mean that we didn't have pain and issues. I remember some meetings with the staff where went to them and said, what do you want to do? Do you want to pay more for benefits? Or do you want to, help us with service level reductions and layoffs? And overwhelmingly, the employees came in and increased their contribution to benefits. And so we don't have unions in Utah, so very different. So I'll just get that right away. So it was just a different, it's just a different mindset. In Hermosa Beach now, I would have the same reaction if I did that there. But I think the Olympics got us into this this mindset of how to deal with crisis. That was something that, a big event to us, and something that we were very successful with. And I just have a quick Olympic story, because I guess part of my take on it too, as a leader, is just kind of what's your personal, reaction going to be when crisis comes, and how are you going to act and how are you going to behave? Because everybody's watching you and they're looking right in your eyes, to see, okay, what's he doing? If he's panicking, I better, we're really screwed, so so they're looking right at you to see what you're going to do. And so I take a real personal approach. And just a quick crisis story: during the Olympics, I was the day officer, which means I was in charge of the city. And remember, the 2002 Olympics were about 4 months after 9/11. So we had everybody from New York was running our emergency operations center. We were our EOC was completely staffed with everybody, that was at ground zero. They were there, and I'm about 2 hours into my shift. This is the first time I've done it. There's an event at Deer Valley with about 10,000 people, and the police chief walks up to me and says, hey, we just got this, confirmed report that there's going to be a nuclear device that's going to go off at Deer Valley at 12 o'clock, and then proceeds to walk away. And so, I'm 37 years old, and I'm sitting there, so I think about that for a minute, and my first thought is, call my wife and tell her to grab the kid and head west, but I didn't do that, and I don't know why I didn't do that. I just thought, hey, I'm in. I looked around that room, I saw all the people, that were there. So I guess, some of the strategies would be, plan and trust your people. I looked around that room and it's like, okay, well, they'll tell me, what's going on, and I'll make the decision and work with it. And then somebody's dog got run over or something, and I got distracted. And I remember thinking, God, there was something. I looked at my watch and it was 12:15, and so good, the nuclear device didn't go off. So for me, dealing with crisis is, whether it's the financial crisis or any other crisis, it's what are you going to do when it happens personally, as a leader, similar to what Betsy was describing.
So Ted, you talk a lot about bureaucracy and how bureaucracy functions or doesn't function, as the case may be. You just heard Tom say that in Park City, they broke through the bureaucracy, flattened the whole thing out because they had too much to do, and they just said, whatever you got to do is what you got to do. Is that the only way that you get to sort of a streamlined type of government that can innovate and be more quick with its responses, or are there more systematic things that you might be able to do, or approaches you might take?
I forget who said a crisis is too good a thing to waste. Somebody. And clearly, a crisis is a device that people can use to make wholesale changes. because you have to. And the assumption about bureaucracy is that, while it was a good system for the Roman army and a pretty good system for the Catholic Church for a couple thousand years, and a pretty good system at the turn of the last century, it has not really a great system in today's technology age. And so whatever we can do to make changes, I mean, managers get paid to manage, and presumably that's what we're good at. And so regardless of what happens, what the economy deals with you, or snow or lack thereof deals you have to manage. And so those of us that have chosen this profession know that whatever comes down the pike, that's what we deal with great interest and hopefully with great skill. It's an opportunity to right the ship. There's an assumption that wherever your organization is now is the best time of it. And it's the right time, it's right-sized. And so we talk about the fact that we had to cut 20%, as I did as well. I became city manager in Visalia almost 35 years ago, April 1, 1978, 60 days before Prop 13 passed. And I had 24 days to cut 24% out of our budget. And 3 years later, we had $20 million in the bank. You use the crisis as a cover to make really hard changes, changes that would be hard if there wasn't a crisis. And so I kind of look forward to manufacturing crises so that you can actually take the bureaucratic thinking and shake it up and make it so that it's much more customer focused, much more alive to the 23 million of us that have chosen to work for governments in our careers in the U.S.
So, so I'll just ask this question sort of open, since all three of you have looked at this. To do these sorts of changes, you have to project some kind of differential vision, right? You say, we're going to go someplace, and that someplace over there. It's not where we are today, and that over there, we're gonna go through, fire pits and all this kind of stuff to get there. How did you do that? And how did it not result in full-scale revolt? And because you have to deal with your staff, you have to deal with the city, and you have to deal with the public, like the media and all that kind of stuff. You all are still here, so you found a way to get through it. Talk a little bit about how you did that. And any of you can.
I'll start. I think it starts with the vision and values. I'll talk a little bit about Park City, and we're starting this in Hermosa Beach, but coming out of the Olympics, we got real clear with our community about what the vision is, not so much from a problem-solving standpoint, but just looking to the future. Many scholars talk about the possibilities. We kind of took that approach, and what we heard back was, keep Park City, Park City. So that meant, don't mess it up. That didn't mean don't change. The chairman of the planning commission, of course, said, that means no more growth. No, it means keep Park City, grow in a way that's consistent with who we are. And so we did a lot of work on getting clear on who we are and what the community values and what would keep people there and what would cause them to leave. And then we aligned our budget with council goals, and just got very clear that, hey, if we're doing something that the elected officials haven't identified as a priority or the community hasn't identified, why are we doing that? And we got very clear with that, and we were small and nimble enough to have those discussions where, with a population of 7,000 people, we had 400 active participants, which is a very high percentage. And so maybe it's a little different in a smaller town, but so we were able to do that.
So you went straight to the public. You just said, we're going to open the doors. Any citizen, come on in and talk to us.
Yeah. Our economic development plan for years in Park City, was the Olympics, and so many looked at the Olympics as sort of the end, and there was a group of us that saw that as the beginning, and so we were able to work with the community and say, okay, now what do we do? We were fortunate for 6 years where we had that economic boom. But Park City, I have a book where Park City is in that book, and it's a book of ghost towns, and that was 1962. So we have a boom. There was a boom bust mentality already. And so the community, I think, was very sort of clear on what needed to be done. That is a luxury of a resort town. Everybody is in the same business, really. You know, that's not a luxury that most cities have.
Now, Betsy, you're in Vegas, right?
Right.
Huge gaming thing.
Right.
Would you say that you, in some ways, you're like Park City in that everyone is bought into one
One-horse town?
horse town, and so you can open the doors up to any citizen and you're pretty sure you're going to get what you get? Or do you have to approach it differently when you have 600,000 as opposed to 7?
I think it's a little different. It's a little bit, it's difficult in that size of a community to get people to engage, I think. And part of it may just be our culture in Las Vegas and the fact that there was so much mobility in a variety of different ways, geographically, income. There were tons of opportunities. And so people spent their time on their vocation, you know, and improving their position and their stuff and all those things. What we've seen since is that there's a much more intense focus on community building now than I witnessed for the first 20 years that I was in that region. And I think that's healthy, but that didn't happen when we were having to really reprioritize and focus in on some key goals. And we did a very similar thing. I mean, look, Las Vegas is known, we're iconic. We pride ourselves on delivering a really, what I would describe as a high service value. We're a pretty low cost, low tax place, and we still deliver great service, in my opinion. And we are becoming one of the most sustainable cities in the country, which is, people usually are shocked when I say that, but you know, we're recognized for that. So, you know, those three things, those kind of what I would describe as strategic anchors really have driven a lot of what we did. And the council stayed really focused on diversifying our economy and making strategic investments to, one, stabilize some of our employment, which is kind of controversial. I mean, we had our own little mini stimulus. And so that created a lot of community conversation. But it drove people to meetings. And so we went through and we did the traditional strategic planning, and we reevaluated our value statements and used every possible venue we could to really fortify that effort. And it has made a difference. It's very easy for me to say, look, our goal is to get our revenues 2 to 5% higher than our expenses. People get it. You can put a thermometer up on the wall. They get it. It's simple. And so simple's better. I know we've heard that before, but simple is better. People get it. The employees can do their own math. And so those are the kinds of things that we tried to hone in on. You know, growing $1 billion worth of value downtown. We need $1 billion worth of value downtown. Very simple. Did we get it? How far did we get? Did we get 100 million last year or not? Did we get 200 million? Very simple. So those are the kinds of things that we tried to drive home so that people knew whether we were making progress or not. And then it's much easier to adapt because you know if something's failing. And then people say, oh yeah, we do need to change because we didn't get anywhere last year on those goals. It's easier. We're not perfect, by the way, but it is easier.
Raphael, I think there's two different answers to your question. After Prop 13 passed, I did a lot of soul searching as to what the meaning of that was. Were citizens angry with us? Were they angry at the state government or the federal government? Our citizens actually didn't pass it, so I assumed it wasn't us. And it got me to thinking that what is the role of government supposed to be? And up until our public administration schools taught us it was to deliver services economically and efficiently. And that seemed like it was outdated. And so we came up with the idea that the role of government, local government for sure, should be to be a broker, catalyst, facilitator in town. And rather than take your 2% of your local GDP, if you could measure that, and use it for retail services, why not use that 2% of the $40 million budget or $100 million budget, whatever you have locally, and use it to leverage whatever services need help in getting to be provided by other service providers. And so we, since that time, for 35 years now, I've not thought that my job was to provide retail level services with very expensive unionized employees. I think that our job is to make sure that the churches do their job, and the schools do their job, and the higher education does their job, and the chamber does their job, and the downtown business merchants do their job, and families do their job. That gets me out of the building and into the community to know exactly what the needs are and what the resources are. And we use little bits of money here and there to make sure that services continue to be provided and quality of life continues to grow and get better without us as a city government being the driving force of doing it on a retail level. But on a wholesale level, behind the scenes, we do a lot to make sure that other people succeed in doing it. So unhooking yourself from the service providing mentality is a key to making a smooth transition and making the city governments infinitely more well respected than if you try to keep doing services and have cutbacks and union strikes and pink slips for teachers in the spring and all that kind of nonsense. The second piece is that, again, I don't think it's taught very well in the public administration schools, is the extreme importance of building culture inside an organization. I didn't learn that. I learned public works administration and budgeting and taxation theory and labor economics, but I didn't learn the importance of culture in an organization and caring about your employees and making them feel like they have made a good choice in choosing public service for a career. And so we invest a lot in our employees so they can in fact be innovative and out in the community and leveraging what's going on. They're deeply embedded in the community, not in their cubbies at City Hall. And so when you have a good culture inside your building and your employees want to work there, want to work with your citizens, it's much easier to make wholesale massive changes as circumstances dictate.
So there's a lot there. And I wanted to sort of open up the question more broadly and to get your thoughts. So you said that you asked the question, are the citizens angry at us? Us, the public sector, us, public administrators. Do you think they are? I mean, if you read certain websites and newspapers or watch certain news channels, maybe all of them, in fact, what you hear is the government did this wrong, they did this corruption, that's a problem. Do you think that the government is angry at us, or that the citizens are angry at us? And then I want to personalize it. Are your citizens angry at you? And if the answer is different, so how did it get to be different?
Well, thank goodness Rush only has 11% of America listening to him now, and it's dropping. Or else you would imagine that all of America is angry at government. That's nonsense. Many local governments have 85, 95% approval ratings. We do very carefully measured random sample surveys every 2 years of our constituents in our city and in our region to see whether our image in our region is improving. And so very carefully measuring that kind of thing. And we have 88%, I think was the last one. There are cities, Palo Alto and others, that have 94% approval ratings of their local residents. So I don't think that's the case. In our case, our citizens definitely are not, and on an individual basis. And I judge that by the fact that nobody comes to our council meeting, which I think is a huge victory. Because if we Americans are very good with starting with the Tea Party, the old Tea Party. We're very good at being angry at things and getting pitchforks and tar and feathers and taking things into our own hands if we're dissatisfied. So we have interpreted the lack of attendance at our meetings as people are really satisfied.
So what about you two? Angry?
I kind of agree. I think that our citizenry was kind of disenchanted to some degree. I think for a long time there was a lot of community conversation about we're growing too fast, it's too much. And I think the development pressure really swayed public policy for quite some time. And and we had a lot of peaks, which was great. I mean, it created great opportunity for a lot of people, me included. I mean, I had an incredible career opportunity. So I know how that feels, but I also know that there were a lot of people who felt like we were going too far, too fast, too many houses being developed, far beyond what we could ever absorb, and then the bottom fell out, and it fell out dramatically. And so I think there was a good bit of disenchantment. But we survey too. And at the height of the recession, the numbers were less than stellar. And in the last couple of years, we've made incredible progress in faith in the local government administration. And I'm really proud of that. Our mayor and council are extremely proud of that. I mean, they are really thrilled. The other test I kind of use back of the napkin test is, how much did my electeds win by? And when they're winning by a lot, then that usually means the citizens are pretty happy with what we're doing. And that's been happening pretty consistently. So, I think we're on the right track. I think the citizens are maybe a little more engaged and still cautious. We have a lot of public sector salary and pension envy or something going on there. It's really hard to get over that. So I think public service is expected but undervalued. And I find that is really difficult to deal with, because it's hard to keep your employees' morale up when they feel like, our firefighters get spit at. People throw bottles at the fire truck. I mean, where does that happen? And it's because they're mad about salaries and things. It's interesting. It's an interesting dilemma that we have, but I think generally we have a good bit of support, enough to know that we're on the right track.
Yeah, my experience has been a little different. Maybe it's coming back to California, maybe being away from it for a while. But yeah, my sense is that people are angry, in Hermosa Beach. I think one thing that I think has happened is that we haven't made that connection between reductions and service levels, and really held the citizens and the elected officials, for that matter, accountable for what that means, and not just coming to the government to solve the problem. I think what's happened is small government, or we got to watch government because of what happened in Bell or whatever else. That's become a policy position. That's not a policy position. That's that's an opinion. Where are you on service levels, and what's your role going to be as an individual to participate in that? I think California, frankly, or at least my experience, just all of 7 months, there's a disconnect there, and maybe it's specific to Hermosa, but we just last night adopted a strategic plan. They didn't have a strategic plan. They were so focused on triage that they couldn't look 5 years, let alone 15. So we've just started that. And then real interesting issue in Hermosa, where need to decide whether the people need to decide whether they're going to allow oil drilling. Currently, it's banned. City settled a lawsuit. Very simple. If the voters overturn the ban, and we strike, and oil is struck, potential for $250 million to the city over 10 years. If the voters don't overturn the ban, the city owes $17.5 million, which we don't have. So talk about a way to build community.
That's creating a crisis.
Well,
right?
that's a crisis, and the approach we're taking is we're going to give you the tools to make the decision, and ultimately it'll be up to you. And you're going to need to decide what you hold dear. I mean, nobody has to live in Hermosa Beach, right? Nobody has to live in Park City. We're all there for 5 or 6, similar reasons. The first one starting with the big, blue thing to the west. Most people are there because of the beach. So when I think about the beach and I think oil drilling, really, do we need to be doing that? Then I got to sort of weigh that, not as a city manager, but as an individual. I got to weigh that with all the other reasons why I'm there. And I like to take sort of a portfolio approach, if you will, where the environment is sort of one piece of my portfolio, schools are another piece, streets, safety, all those things are components of why I'm there as a citizen. And at the end of the day, I'm going to get to decide the future of Hermosa as a voter. We have people that are mad about that. You know, they want to go back to, what did you, why did you settle that? What were you thinking, and they want to go back and have that discussion, as opposed to taking ownership for the possibilities and owning it. So it's a different experience.
So I'm going to change gears a little bit. This series is called Leading from the West, and it was really sparked with the experience I had in Washington, and then talking to people suggested it was right, which is that when Washington people talk about policy and they're looking for people to engage with, they call people in New York, in Boston, in Washington, maybe Chicago when the president is from there. And that's pretty much it. And this notion that the Western experience is not informing policy struck me as leaving a big hole in terms of the American experience and how it informed what we thought about was possible. So I wanted to ask sort of your perspectives on being leaders in sort of Western places. And is the West different? What kind of opportunities or challenges might being out here offer in terms of running a city? Ted, do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I hadn't really thought about it until you raised the question. The closest I could, the memory that comes up when you ask that question is when I started my career as city manager in Ohio, and so came to California 38 years ago. And I got a healthy respect for the managers in Ohio and Michigan and the Midwest at the time. And so I respected their ideas and admired, actually, many of their ideas. And so I came to California, I got into the club of California city managers and found a stunning arrogance of California apparently thought that everything that was ever good was invented here, and it was enough to just have California minds working on things. And it was offensive to me to imagine that one group of professionals would virtually shut out the East and the Midwest in terms of having creative ideas. And so it was almost a reverse that. Now, we all have learned, I think, that there are great ideas that have come out of California, for sure, that have led not only social phenomenon, but managerial phenomenon. There are some leading thought leaders about public sector managing here in California, but they're not exclusively here in California. Whether that translates, my business is local government, and so whether or not Washington thinks about California local government as a source, I'm not sure that they have a lot to pick from when they think about the governors that we've had here. So,
Betsy or Tom?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've my whole career has been in the West, and Las Vegas is sort of its own little island. We're a little different, and we're kind of in our own little valley there, and we talk to each other and kind of have to manage in our 17 cities in our very large state. To only have 17 city managers is kind of a trip. But anyway, it's I think that a lot of those conversations that happen about local government policy at the federal level have really kind of been, in my opinion, absent for a long time, probably 2 decades. I know there are urban policies that have happened, but there really hasn't been a focus on urban policies at a federal level. Maybe that's a good thing, because then we're left to our own devices and we get to do whatever it is we do. But I don't feel that there's a whole lot of reaching out. I actually, during the presidential campaign, not this last one, but the one before, when President Obama was elected, he did reach out to a lot of local governments around the country and asked for feedback on a variety of public policy issues. And I thought, wow, this really could open some doors for some candid conversation between the levels of government. But I think that's happening in every level of government, and it's not just regional. It's, federal to state and state to local, and all of those things. Everybody's so into what they're doing, they kind of forget about the fact that we're all a big system sometimes, and that we probably ought to be working together regardless of region or size, and having those conversations and learning from each other.
So just to add a little amendment, I think that's exactly right. But how do you do it? How do you change who's in the room when you're having these conversations, or what things you talk about? And I'm just opening it up, so Tom, if you wanted to.
Yeah, let me see if I can weave that into what I was just thinking about, which is, I'm biased on the West. I grew up in Pasadena. I think there are issues that the West is in a unique position to have to address. And so as far as getting the right people in the right room, I'm sure those people can be throughout the whole country, but just as an example, what's coming to me is just sustainability and looking at not only environmental sustainability, but the connection back to the community and the economy. And, I, despite growing up in Southern California, and my parents are here, and having my mother, deposit me into the back of the station wagon, sick from smog inhalation, I remember those days. I don't have that fire that people do for environmental issues. But how can I be the manager of a beach city or a ski town and not be, absolutely committed to the environment, because our economy is based on it. We did studies in Park City where we showed where the snow line was going to be, it was about half the mountain, and so how, I think that the West, could somebody in Vermont do that? Sure. Could somebody, but I think Colorado, others are maybe uniquely in a position, Nevada, to be looking at that connection. For me, it seems much more real. I don't know. I'm sure the East Coast has it, but and that connection back to the community. That's one thing that we saw with our staff, was that the bus driver knew that if that guest had a good experience, they'd be back, which meant maybe there wouldn't be layoffs, maybe there would be a raise. And that was very real. Now, I'm sure that happens everywhere and in bigger cities, and it's not just related to the West, but I don't know, that sort of back to the personal connection, to me just seems more real in the West, and maybe it's my own bias.
I think sustainability is an excellent example, because I think a lot of local governments are doing a lot on the environmental front to improve their own performance in that regard, and that performance is informing other policies that are being considered when there's not national action to any great degree. So I do think local governments, through their actions, can inform some of those policies just through performance, actually making it work, or having it fail. In a way, we're maybe a good little test case for some of the things that happen for us as a country. And I think the other piece is that we've got all these mega regions, and we all need to be working together a lot more than we are. Tom and I were talking about the fact that it's really kind of unfortunate that we don't necessarily have the same kind of exposure to other local government administrations in other countries that those countries have to us. I can't tell you the number of times that we have Chinese delegations, Taiwanese delegations, people from Australia, wherever, pick a country. They've come to visit us. I can count on one hand how many times I've been to another country as an official delegate from the city of Las Vegas to find out what they're doing. And even when I got back, one of my council people was like, "Hey, Betsy was on a junket." I said, "I really wasn't on a junket. I actually really learned a lot, and I think we could learn a lot from each other." So it's kind of interesting that we limit our own exposure. We get in our own silos, and we feel comfortable staying there, and it really takes a conscious effort to push ourselves out of it. But we need to be thinking bigger than our cities, our regions, our mega regions, and our country.
So just as an amendment on that, so we had an event with Ron Loveridge, who was the mayor of Riverside, and he said exactly the same thing about quote, the junket, which is that, you know, he viewed all his trips as an opportunity to find new ideas, and he would make a point to come back with 3 new ideas that he was going to try in the city on every trip, and he could name them to provide that accountability. The notion of a junket is difficult, but it is something, you know, we've got to share information. Part of what universities do and others is to get the word out about interesting things that are happening, and so thank you for bringing that up.
Just a thought, certainly President Reagan took a bunch of Californians in his cabinet, and I don't think anybody's done that since that time, that has picked, we've had Condoleezza Rice, we've had a few, but not nearly the percentage. I mean, California is, what, 14% of the population of the United States, and certainly 14% of the thinkers, maybe more, are here. And you do seem a little underrepresented. There have been cabinet members from Oregon, cabinet members from Arizona, cabinet members from Washington. I don't know about Nevada.
Not yet.
Yeah. So we are certainly underrepresented, and it's partly who you go to school with, who you're comfortable with, who's on your Rolodex. I guess not Rolodex anymore. It's,
Well, I think the Rolodex thing is real, and you know, we collectively need to think about how we broaden that to include the things that we're doing. I think that's one of the things that we're interested in engaging in as a further conversation at the center, but really trying to make sure that, you know, the things that we know and have learned here become part of the national dialogue, which should be interesting. We have about, I guess, 10 minutes left or so before we want to open this up, and I have like 6 other questions that I want to ask. So I'm not going to get through all of them. But there are 2 I want to do. The first is around technology. So we were talking earlier, and we were noting, well, maybe I brought it up, but the important role that technology is playing for me in my life as a professor. So, you know, when I started, everyone didn't have computers, and now they have computers in the class, and they're taking their notes and maybe doing some other things. And it's really changed how I teach. I was interested in any reflections you might have about how technology is changing how cities play out and the things that you're engaging or seeing, and how you might approach that.
Well, I think it's going to change the way we govern. It has to. I mean, I've already seen it. You know, in Hermosa, our meetings are, you know, on you know, live web, and so people will come in the middle of the meeting when they see their item. You know, we're 1 square mile, right? So they'll be there in a minute when their item is up. You know, and that's the kind of thing that I never thought of before. You know, the other thing, we're actually policing, you know, using Facebook, and we're catching criminals using Facebook. You know, that creates, you know, a nightmare for the city manager when the neighborhood watch is learning about crime before he is and the city council members. But, you know, so that's something that we're able to work through. But I think it's going to change. And, you know, I was born the last year of, so I'm a boomer, you know, but so I've had to learn it. I don't get it entirely. But I know when I want to have discussions with, you know, my nieces and nephews and my son, you know, I'm texting. I'm not calling them on the phone, you know, and so we're going to have to change the way we govern. It's going to be instant. People are going to walk in when their item shows up as opposed to reading about it tomorrow, you know, and so I don't know what we do with that exactly other than embrace it and try to do the best we can.
I envision city council meetings that have screens up with people tweeting their ideas and their thoughts about what's going on. You know, maybe I'm just getting a real eye-opener with some of the things that the Downtown Project, which is a Tony Hsieh spinoff, is happening downtown, but things are instant. And I really learned the hard way. I was telling these guys earlier that we were dealing with a noise ordinance downtown, and we were planning a neighborhood meeting because one of my council members was interested in introducing a noise restriction ordinance in a newly emerging entertainment district. And one of the casino owners in that general area called and said, "Hey, have you guys looked at Facebook? 2,500 people have said yes to an invitation to come to your town hall meeting tonight." And it was a real eye-opener for us because, you know, we had a room about the size of the stage. Because for normal town hall meetings, we might get 10 people to show up, 12, I don't know. And here we were expecting a lot and had no clue. Had he not called us, we'd have walked into that meeting and not know what we were walking into. And we walked into everybody in a pink shirt with a placard saying no noise ordinance, no noise ordinance, hundreds of people in this little tiny area. So at least we were prepared, but it was a real eye-opener for me that we really need to be monitoring social media because your traditional sources of information are just that. They're traditional now. And you got to go to the new sources. And that's also informing, in my opinion, informing a lot of public opinion out in the streets that don't show up in your normal modes of feedback. But you need to know what's going on there because it really does give you the pulse of what's important in the community. So we're having to change a lot of the things we're doing as a result of that kind of engagement, that kind of community activism that's happening out there.
My lifelong passion is helping governments change peacefully from within, and I hope that's the passion of some of you as well. And so whatever mechanisms there are for causing change to occur, so we get out of our 19% approval rating, or the citizens who might be angry with us, we need to do that. And there's investing in culture is one of those ways. Changing your mindset about service delivery versus being a catalyst in the community is another one. Technology is clearly one. And there are all kinds of things. Virtually everybody has computers in their cop cars now. And nobody sits in a meeting anymore debating facts, whether Greenland is bigger than Canada, because somebody in 30 seconds will have the fact checked and brought down into the meeting. So you don't have to wait now for 3 or 4 days to debate facts. They're instantly available, and so you can have more substantive conversations quicker because you're not hung up on debating whether the foundation of an argument is true or not. So urging governments to invest in technology, to embrace it, to be a little careful with it sometimes. It's anything else that's new and changing. The crooks are every bit as fast as the good guys. And so to some extent, we need to make sure that we are not leaving gaping holes open, but even Microsoft and Apple and others do leave holes in what they do out, and they have to quickly close them up. So it's not unusual that government will also have a few holes that they have to cover back up. But I think there's all kinds of things. We now know exactly how much each parcel of land costs us in terms of service, all kinds of service, social services, library services, kids services, whatever it might be. And we know how much revenue is produced from each parcel of land. I mean, that's easy to do. So we can make better public policy about what we do with a piece of land. We use crime statistics and other statistics to find out where our problem pieces of property are. And we have a program called Focus on 50, where we go after the 50 worst properties. Each year that changes, not wholesale, but it mostly changes. And we can target our resources, very careful resources, on those that statistically, because of technology, have shown up to be bad actors. Well, usually apartments, but not always. And so we need to embrace it and invest in it and not be afraid of it.
All right, so I've been given the hook, so I'm going to hold my last question to the end. This is moderator's prerogative. And we're going to open this up. So if you have questions that you would like to introduce to the conversation, I would entertain them. My only admonition is that if you ask a question, you should ask it in a way that is like how you would like someone to ask you the question, so that it stays in a nice, civil way. So are there questions that people have? Yes?
As somebody who wants to be a city manager someday, what one piece of advice would you give to me?
That was his last question.
So that was my last question.
That's great.
So I guess we're not...
Great minds think alike.
So I'll ask
Hold
it...
off on that.
Oh, no. We're there. That's where we are, right? So the question is, if he wished to be a city manager, what advice would the panelists give in terms of getting there?
Well, let me start. 53 years ago, as a freshman in college, I heard the word city manager for the first time, and 53 years later, I'm still doing it. I like it. It's been a great career. I purposely did not want to be regionally typecast, so I started in the Midwest and went east, and then to Oregon, and then to Maryland, and then to Ohio, and finally to California. So I got a breadth of experience on East Coast, West Coast, and Midwest. So I would urge you to do that. I would urge you to enjoy managing. The manager profession has lost over 100 years a lot of the powers that it originally had, and because of audit things or court decisions or union agreements, or there's 1,000 reasons why slowly our world has diminished in terms of our capabilities. And I would urge all of us to push back and get back some of the original powers that we had, so you can actually manage. And there's 1,000 ways of making sure that you get back some of the powers, and then obviously you're responsible for using those powers wisely. One of the quick one is the limits of a manager's ability to make purchases has diminished over the years for state law, court cases, grand jury, whatever it is. When I started with our city 10 years ago, I said one of the things that citizens hate about council meetings is sitting through endless presentations by people purchasing paper or bullets or cars or whatever that is that we purchase, snow, ice removal stuff, whatever. It seems silly. So they gave me a $100,000 purchasing thing, and so if it's less than $100,000, the council never sees it. So the agendas are cleared up, and citizens can actually use council meetings for things that they care about, not some vendor cares about. And so it's just a simple thing like that, of making sure that you do the things as manager that people pay you to do, that somehow have been eroded over the years, and somehow council have gotten involved thinking it's their job to do managerial kinds of things.
So Betsy, advice?
Take advantage of any opportunity you get that seems like it'd be fun. Don't be scared. I think a lot of times that people feel like they're kind of not ready. They're not sure that they're ready for whatever that job is. Usually, if you get the right training, which you're here, it's one of the best schools in the country, getting that kind of training, you're going to be all right. Get people like Ted to help you along the way, get a good mentor or someone that you can talk to get some career advice. I think diversity and experience is really important. I don't know that there are people that make it through a line position, they come up through a public works, or they come up through police, or they come up through whatever. And then there are people that come up through the staff line. If you can get both experiences and not get stuck, I think that helps a lot. But don't worry about not having experience in public works to become a city manager or police. Just make sure that you're listening and that you've got good people around you. And it really can be a fun job. It's never the same. Every day is totally different. It's very challenging, and it's extremely rewarding. It's really worth it. And you have the chance to really imprint a community in a way that really not many other positions have. And it's fun. And you get to build a team that you like being with. So it's really it's a neat job.
Tom?
Cool. I guess my piece of advice would be develop a trade, develop a specialty. That worked well for me. I was here at USC and I took a core class, and they offered me a scholarship to specialize in finance, and I never really was a math or finance guy, and I said, okay, take the money, right? That's rule number one, take the money. And so I got that specialization, and that made me very marketable, so that's kind of a nuts and bolts answer. I think Betsy mentioned the mentor. I was very lucky to find a mentor that, was well known as a finance director in California, and that's somebody that I learned from. So that would be sort of my practical advice. I think sort of the personal advice would be, and this is going to sound a little mushy, but get to know yourself and be ready to change. That's something that I've definitely experienced as I've come up through the ranks to be a city manager. I had to change just about everything and how I looked at things. I came up, thinking about silos and very concerned about what I was doing, and I had to go through sort of that personal transformation. Some think people are wired to be city managers. I'm not. I don't know if I buy that, but you need to be ready to change.
Ted, you wanted to add one more thing.
Just a quick echo. Tom said, nobody is going to entrust you to be a manager of a city if you don't have some finance background. I mean, why would they do that? So somewhere you need to have some finance background, and you don't have to be a finance director, but you can get, volunteer to be on the budget committee for a local water district or something. Learn, the fundamentals of that and bond issues and all the tax and levies. Somebody needs to. You can't run a local government without having finance. Then I say you need to have one of the other two things. Either you need to have blue shirt experience, police and fire, or you need to have green shirt experience, which is public works, utilities, parks, recreation, those kind of things. Either one of those, because they're major spenders of your money in capital or operating budgets. Just a thought, when I started my career, police and fire combined nationwide was 36% of our general fund budget. Today it's 81%. So police and fire alone, with no increase in betterment of their services, have pushed out all of the other services by about 40%. So as a society, we have a real issue with where police and fire costs are going. It's unsustainable, the track that they're on. So as a manager, you need to be paying attention a little bit to that policy issue.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Al Santianes, and I just retired, Ted, from about a 35-year in local government, and I think it was a tremendous ride, and I admire you, all of you, for your service in the public sector. We tend to get a bad rap, and I'm not sure if it's from the politicians that probably have very low approval ratings. Who knows what it is? But I think that the services that we offer, the skills that you have, are really notable, but they go unrecognized many times because of the baggage that you carry. For example, in my retirement, I've stopped telling people many times that I retired with a public pension because on fair game they just tear me apart. It just like fighting the windmills. However, I think my point was what Ted had to mention about the fact that government. He started to work to mention this point that government is not the only answer in our crisis. It's got to be the whole city, including the constituents. But when you have non-involvement rates that are, very low, how do you even begin to work with that? But it just can't be put on government to solve every problem that happens locally. That is something that I've heard recently in other forums with city managers. And then another little term.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, the question was, how do you feel about that? Government is not the only answer in general.
I agree. I mean, I agree that it comes back to the citizens and the engagement, and that Peter Block talks a lot about that. When he talks about people going to the vending machine, and putting in money and getting a pop out of there or a piece of candy. That's kind of the mindset many people have regarding government, as opposed to, he describes building a house. I believe that, and we'll see what happens in Hermosa. We're trying to engage that and have people decide, through a vote, of what their community is going to be. It's either going to tear us apart or bring us together. And right now, I don't know which one it's going to be. I hope it brings us together. I hope it doesn't turn political, where, the decision is made, based upon, page 322 of an environmental impact report, that somebody, got their arms around or whatever. It's going to be a decision that the people make for what's what's best for them.
I think it's, in any community, you need to have all sectors pulling their weight. I mean, and I think as managers, we have an obligation to kind of figure out who else can be doing that besides you. And before you get in that business, you better be talking to them. Because, you know, there are a lot of constraints Ted's talked about in the way we can deliver services, and there's also a lot of fiduciary responsibility among local governments. I think the taxpayer really has expectations and rights to those expectations, I think, on balance. But we have a responsibility to deliver the best service we possibly can at the lowest price point, and we have to explore all those options. And we've been using nonprofit partnerships a lot to fill gaps in the last few years, and it's working, and the nonprofits are happy about it, and the community's happy about it, and probably half of you guys that are students here are like, yay, because you're probably focusing in on nonprofit leadership. I don't know. That's where everybody seems to be wanting to go in public sector now. So anyway, I think it's an obligation and a responsibility.
Well, I would just chime in here to say that, you know, the Price School has purposefully tried to be not about just the public sector,
Right.
but also being clear that nonprofit management is an important consideration in the delivery of policy. And also, we talk a lot about public-private partnerships as an important additional tool to delivering effective policy. And in fact, you know, if it works out, you all can get a book that we're working on, which is really trying to identify under what situations the different approaches make the most sense. So sometimes the public sector delivery service will be the right answer. Sometimes it's the wrong answer, and being able to distinguish between those is really important.
The context of what we're talking about is that with the Bismarck's Germany in 1872 or 3, it became the first welfare state the world had ever seen. Prior to that time, there were no governments involved in old age pension systems, orphanages, education, any of those services. But to counteract the downsides of the Industrial Revolution, people demanded, through socialism, communism, and others, that governments get involved. So governments started to grow in Europe. Finally, in the U.S., with Roosevelt coming to office in 1933, we took our percentage of GNP, what we launder through government, from 20% to almost 40%, 38.4%. And then Prop 13 hit, and actually the statistical year it turned was 1976, not 1978. And all governments around the world have shrunk their percentage of GNP, other than for wars, that they spent. People were turning away. So we had a 100-year experiment of people turning to governments to provide services. Now they're backing away from that in droves. So our industry has changed. We do not need to be, people don't want us to be involved in the retail service delivery business. I think it's true that the GNP, in spite of our downturn in government services we've provided here in California and other places, that GNP actually grew all that time except for 1 year. So the total amount of money that's available to provide goods and services, to quality of life services to our citizens, grew. The percentage that was laundered through government has shrunk. And so we, as managers, need to adapt to that changing condition, that changing appetite, and figure out how can we leverage the continuing to grow GNP to make sure that our citizens have the services that they want to have. Very different mindset, very different thinking in terms of training that you need to have to manage in that environment.
So I think that's right. I think there are some analytical issues about how you manage what government represents in that context, because to the extent that it is contracting out, does that show up as private activity, public activity? But I think one of your important underlying points is that the productivity of the sector has actually gone up, the services and the like. And that's not something that people talk about very much when they think about how this plays out. Other questions we have right here in the front?
Hi, my name is Clifford Sutton, and I want to thank you all for the insights you've given to the very tough jobs that you all have. But my question is that each and every one of you have spoken about sustainability and the things that you've done towards sustainability. Can you give us an example of some of the things you've done and some of the projects that you're considering to increase your participation in sustainability? Give us some ideas of what you're doing.
I don't mind starting. We've invested heavily in solar in the city of Las Vegas. We're just actually going to have a ribbon cutting in a couple of weeks on a 5 megawatt facility out at our sewer plant, and that's going to really take a lot of our energy costs way down over time, and we feel really good about what we're doing on the energy front. We're trying to get to a net zero energy city, which is kind of a lofty goal, but you kind of have to do that. We've cut our waste stream by 50% just by focusing in on it in the last year, just as a city, not a community. We got a lot of work to do in the community, but as a city, we've done that. It saved us a lot of money. In fact, we're sending the bill to our solid waste disposal company to say, you owe us this back because we didn't get the service, which is really nice for the bottom line, right? So it's sort of working. And on water conservation, I think we're a regional leader. Our community is using less water than we were a decade ago, by about 39 billion gallons of water. And we've grown our population by 400,000. So we are doing a lot on a lot of different environmental fronts. A lot of it is right now city focused. We do have green building efforts and things like that we've worked on. We've got the first LEED designated neighborhood in the city of Las Vegas. We're really excited about that. It's one of our major redevelopment projects downtown. So we're making a lot of strides, and it's kind of a little under the radar, which is maybe nice because it hasn't created a whole lot of fodder. And from some of our energy activities, we've been able to cut our utility costs over the last 2 years in double digits both years. So we're making a lot of progress. When you're in tight times, every one of those dollars counts. So that's our story.
Do either you don't feel like you have to answer every question. So if either of you wants to weigh in, you're welcome to, or we can go to the next one.
Our city hall is LEED certified, but it's not a passion of mine. So I assume we're doing good things. It's just that I'm not providing leadership in that area.
Quickly, just my thought, anytime someone says sustainability, I assume they're meaning environmental. I tend to, look at economic and community as well. I think for me, where I've seen the ability to bridge the environmental sustainability is come through making the economic argument and the return on investment. Because, just about every place I've been, the council is split. You have your true believers in environmental sustainability, and you have your fiscal conservatives. And the way to bridge it is by showing that return on investment. And it is there. It is there, with solar, and it is there with some other things. And so there's a whole new world ahead as it relates to economic development and how you truly are sustainable through economic development. So.
All right. It is 7:30, and that is when we were supposed to end. So I'm going to try to stick to that. I wanted to close just with a couple of thoughts. So we do these panels pretty regularly through the course of the year, not always with such illustrious guests. But in the lead up to this, Ted asked us to do something that we usually don't get asked to do. As you can tell, he's provocative and has strong opinions on things. And it was to talk about what we wanted from you, what we wanted you to feel when you left tonight. And so I actually wrote them down. And there are three things that led to a fourth. So the first was to gain a renewed sense of respect for the field of public administration and policy. The second is to develop a stronger personal interest in contributing to the field. And the third is to remember a particularly interesting or personally notable insight that you might use again next week, 2 weeks from now, maybe a month from now. So hopefully we've done all of those things. And what I told the panelists, and I thought would be true, is that if we did that, you'd all wish that we had another 30 minutes to go. And there are a number of hands would suggest that there were still some things not covered, but hopefully those things will keep the light burning for you, keep you talking about these things, and come back again for some more conversation about governance and public policy and actually getting things done effectively and efficiently and having fun while doing it. Please join me in thanking our panelists, and thank you for coming.